Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I got to go to the settings here. Hold on. Leave this or not. Hello, everyone. This is Richard White in Atlanta with Orasi. We're going to wait just one moment for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started. What do you think? Go ahead. Give us about 30 more seconds and we'll get started. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to our webinar entitled The Formula for Enterprise DevOps. And so we're hoping to give you a pretty informative session, giving you a view between where we think things are in the DevOps world today and sort of discuss the landscape for how we see that landscape maturing in the DevOps space. My name is Richard White. I'm one of the leaders of Orasi's Agile and DevOps delivery practice based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We are joined today by leaders from several of our key vendors in the DevOps space. We have Adam Bowen, who is Senior Director of DevOps for Delphix. Adam, please say hello. Adam?
Hi. Hey, everybody. Thanks. My mute button's I'm using two screens. My mute button's all the way on the other side. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Richard.
Sure. We've also got Scott Erlanger with XebiaLabs, Senior Product Marketing Manager. Say hello, Scott.
Hello, everybody.
And then finally, last but not least, and that amazing sweater there, we've got Datical CTO Robert Reeves. Say hello, Robert.
Hello, Robert.
There you go. There you go. So hopefully what we're going to do is we're going to move fast. We don't have like just a ton of information on the screen. Hopefully you'll see more visual and interactive type presentation. I would like to go through sort of our high level agenda. I'm going to start off by talking through sort of what is driving DevOps, why is it such a popular concept these days, and you know, just discuss at a high level what our observation of what's happening in the market and what's sort of preventing us or has been preventing us from reaching an enterprise DevOps capability. I'm going to turn it over to Robert for a few minutes to talk about the formula for enterprise DevOps, which will include a whole set of things. And then it'll come back and I'll basically work through one-on-one sort of discussions with each of our vendors, XebiaLabs, Datical, and Delphix, to allow them to describe their solution. And if we have time at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A. So, if I can get my mouse to move forward here. So what is driving the emphasis on DevOps? The reality is businesses continue to be challenged to deliver new capabilities and features from the vision all the way through to production with more velocity every day. And the pace is simply getting faster and expectations just really continue to rise. And the reality is to meet those expectations, most IT organizations have spent the last 10 or 15 years really changing the way that their business is, their IT organization is organized, the processes for how they deliver capabilities and the tools that they use. And what you see is that every couple of weeks, many organizations are able to get things out of their development teams, but the real challenge has been how do we get things all the way through into a production environment. From our perspective, the path to get just to a dev level down a pipeline from once the development team gives it over, moving through things like source code management, through build, deployments, test, etc. That's a pretty long process. And then when you start to think about, many organizations have multiple tiers of how they must move through to get it to production. So through things like QA, UAT, into production, it just becomes a more complex challenge than most people consider. And most organizations, what we find is they haven't spent near as much time on that back end, really investing and automating and doing the things that are required so that they have continuous flow from the time that development is finished till it gets to production. Now, what we have found is that there are a few groups out there, and it's not just these, we just give these obviously as examples. Groups like Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, their entire ability to deliver to their customers is based on them being able to go to production early and often. And so what we find is, they're sort of best practice. Many of them have very integrated pipelines. They have very automated pipelines, dynamic. They're able to provision infrastructure as they needed to stand up environments, etc. And they really just have sort of a seamless way of going that allows them to just continuously flow through their pipeline into production. The reality is the rest of the world, that what we're seeing is not near at that automated level. As a matter of fact, most of the places that we deal with, most of our clients that we are working with, they tend to have siloed groups. And so whether it's on the front end and that sort of continual integration space around source code and build, whether it may be in their operations or their infrastructure groups, their QA function, their continuous monitoring, etc., they tend to have pockets where there's automation and then there's gaps, and there's automation and there's gaps. As a matter of fact, in most organizations, there's just a lot of manual steps, and so you're only going to go as fast as your weakest link. And so many of these groups most organizations have manual steps in their process. On top of that, where they do have tools, they've tended to throw hundreds of tools, even in some simple cases, just to go from source code management to production. One client we were dealing with, pretty small tool chain, and they had over 50 tools in their chain just to get things to production. And in some cases, many organizations tend to use different tools to do the exact same thing. And then the one thing that we hit that nobody really wants to talk about is the cultural adoption. Does our dev group and our operations group, security, et cetera, are they really motivated? Are they incented to work together to really achieve that continuous flow that most groups are seeking? And so from our perspective, we just, a couple of market observations where we think things have gone well or better. On the front end, we do see most groups, because it's one of the first steps in the tool chain, is most groups have a pretty good feel for their continuous integration. So they've got some capability so that they're not stomping on code. They're able to continually drop new code and to at least recompile it and get out a build. But what we find is those folks who have that have other pockets of the tool chain that aren't automated in it. And so again, they're only as fast as their weakest link. There are other groups that, whether they have the CI sort of satisfied or not, they've spent a lot more time on the infrastructure as code. As a matter of fact, we kind of joke, we can go into usually a DevOps organization and we can tell kind of who drove, was it the infrastructure person? Was it the dev? Was it QA who was really, put in charge of coming up with the overall DevOps vision, because they tend to have that sort of fallback on where they came from. Basically, it'll define where they're sort of spending a lot of their time. Other groups, from a QA perspective, we've seen them move beyond just more of the focusing on UI to really focusing on more of API and beginning to end testing. Other groups have spent more time focusing on, if we have all the packages there, how can we deploy that to some complex environments? And then what we see is that across that whole pipeline, a lot of people have been using tools like Jenkins to really automate more of the serial pipeline process of the way it grew up. And so there's not a lot of concurrency. There's not a lot of things happening at the same time. They're sort of beginning to end, and we've done actually a lot of working with clients to help them script out those environments and take them from beginning to end using those type of tools. One of the things that some of the things that we haven't seen as that's sort of keeping it from becoming an enterprise type solution. Specifically, if you look at the pipeline, and I'm going to try to see if I can get my, there we go. So if you start to look at the pipeline and you start to say, instead of this entire process beginning to end taking X time frame, how can we take pieces of the pipeline and start to truly move them to the left? Maybe not the entire piece, but at least portions of it, and be able to truly shift things left and do things in a more concurrent way, so that instead of taking that original timeline, now maybe we can do it in some subset of that time. And so as we start to refactor this process, you can start to think about what are the things that if I could move them left would allow us to fail faster and to execute more quickly. To do that, you couldn't do that 3 or 4 years ago, because the concept of ephemeral or dynamic environments was only potentially small scale capable. Now there are a lot of tools out there that allow us to really stand up and create and manage environments, specifically tools that allow us to create and manage test data once we get those environments created, and very complex orchestration tools that allow us to actually, if we're going to run things in parallel, allow us to keep up with where things are and how they're working. And the final thing I would say about where I see the enterprise DevOps area going is there are just some specific holes in the process. There has been. I come from a DBA background, and as we've built out pipelines, I'm constantly amazed at how we've built out and automated a lot of the application builds. We've automated a lot of the infrastructure components, and then at the very end, we're standing around handing our stuff over to a DBA who's magically going in there and running their scripts to convert the databases. And so the whole database release management area is an area that in many cases has sort of been the black hole and been left, hasn't been automated. And so what we're going to do right now is I'm going to pass it over to Robert, and I'm going to allow him to step through what some of these formulas that we've talked about for an enterprise DevOps solution might look like. So let me see if I can switch this over to him. I probably need to put my glasses on so I can actually see his name pop up there. Robert, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. So we need to definitely share my screen. There we go. So everybody can see this, right? The formula for enterprise DevOps. So I don't think it's going to be any surprise to anybody that, applications kind of require a database. And when we start talking about the enterprise, things get really complicated real quick. So here we have just, a number of applications. And typically in enterprises, they'll have more than one database. But just for sake of argument, we're just showing a one-to-one relationship. What adds complexity here is the dependency between the applications. And it is really hard to tease these apart. Sometimes they communicate through the database. Sometimes they'll communicate through batch file processing, sometimes through web services. But there is some kind of dependency that these applications require. Now, these applications are monoliths. In a typical enterprise today, these are applications that are a little bit older than the technology we have available today. And I look at it instead of a microservices architecture, this is more of a macro services architecture. Now, where things get a little squirrely is when we update an application, we'll have the application, it'll run great. It passed testing, but unfortunately, we did not test it against the other applications. And so that causes a lot of problems. We've all seen the meme, I don't always test my software, but when I do, it's in production. And that's what we're forced to do. We're forced to push this out to production in periods of low usage to see if something blows up, and then we roll it back. This is not a recipe for success. This is hamster wheel deployments, and this is just not good. So in the past, what we've done is we've had a staging environment. Let's create an environment that mirrors production. Maybe you buy twice as much hardware for a production environment, but that only gives us one staging environment. So we're single threaded, and it's 2019. We have multiple development teams, multiple applications, multiple releases. We can't be single threaded through one staging environment, swapping back and forth between staging and production. It just won't keep up. So the solution that we've seen our customers, XebiaLabs, Datical, Delphix, is using virtual staging environments, ephemeral environments. So let's talk about what that looks like. So we'll first have a production environment. You see that on the right. And the first step is to create virtual databases using Delphix. Delphix can very quickly create copies of production using far less storage, and also mask that data. They can hide personally identifying information so that in your staging environment, that's just not there. Of course, XebiaLabs is the orchestration engine that's not only calling Delphix to create these virtual databases, but they're also standing up the applications. And with this first step, we have created an exact duplicate of production. Well, that's what our staging environment is. Yay! So now we can get to work and start testing this. XebiaLabs will push out that new application, maybe just one of the 5 applications. But of course, we need to update the database schema, and that's where Datical comes in to add a column, update a stored procedure in that Delphix provided virtual database. From there, we can really see not only does the application work correctly, the one that we're changing, but we can also see the impact on the other applications. And good or bad, if it turns out that testing cycle is positive or negative, it just evaporates. It goes away. We don't have to worry about the care and feeding of this ephemeral staging environment anymore. We just shut it down. If it was bad, we send the release back to development. If it was good, we can push forward to production. And what we've seen from customers that are using these 3 solutions is that they are actually scheduling production deployments without people. Because by definition, they've already tested not only the application and its impact on other apps that haven't changed, but they've also tested the deployment mechanism. So scheduling this and not having people on call, well, that's a no-brainer. What this has led to is, 1, multiple staging environments, multiple ephemeral environments. And we've also seen this application starting to leak back away from staging into SIT, UAT, even in development environments. And that has accelerated innovation at our customers that are using this technology. What it has also accelerated is their move to the cloud. Their ability to separate the what from the where. When they have this ability to create ephemeral environments in effectively their private cloud inside their data center, what that allows them to do is start investigating the move to a public cloud. And that's really powerful for them to not only get economies of scale, but also lower costs and faster innovation. So Richard, let me go ahead and send it on back to you. And so I will go over to attendees. I will right click on your name and make presenter.
Wow, and there you go. Show my screen. Look at that. We passed it by. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate it. So hopefully that gives you just a quick idea of visually seeing how these pipelines can really be automated and move to an enterprise level. What we were going to do next is I was going to basically sort of allow each of the vendors to go in and talk a little bit about what their solutions are. We'll start off with XebiaLabs. Personally, as a consultative organization, we'll talk at the end about what we do. We've seen and helped people build pipelines that are, generally built. They're really not highly visual. You're not able to see everything beginning to end, and the concept of automating both manual and non-automated tasks and having trends as that, metrics as far as how long it's taking us to get from step to step in the pipeline is just not something that we have a lot of great visibility into. So I'm going to pass it over to Scott right now and let him talk a little bit about what Xebia can do to help us in this DevOps Enterprise view.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so as Richard just mentioned, it's really pulling together all these different manual and automated pieces into a single pipeline is the value that the XebiaLabs DevOps platform brings. We actually produce the industry-leading orchestration and release orchestration and deployment automation platform. We've been here since the early days of DevOps, and we are regularly recognized by many of the industry analysts for our leadership within the DevOps field. Basically, the XebiaLabs DevOps platform provides a single end-to-end pipeline for your release process, where you can pull in all of your processes and tools within your entire DevOps tool chain. The big thing, though, is that our software supports at enterprise scale. We support many of the world's biggest companies. Some of them are actually shown on the bottom right of this slide right here, but this includes many of the world's largest banks, as well as companies whose needs include releasing thousands of applications. Next slide.
I clicked it, but it's just not quite getting there. I anticipated well, but I didn't execute.
There it goes. There no problems. There you go. Yeah, so depending on who you are and what your role is, you may have several different questions or problems that you're trying to address. If you're in management, you may want to know what's actually being released. Sometimes it's not obvious, or you may not be there on the day-to-day process there. What are the risks to your schedule? Are things going to fall behind? How are things going as far as your audits and compliance? And how is the release process improving from generation to generation? Are you seeing your failure rate decrease? At the enterprise level, you might have a different set of questions. You may want to know, how to update your legacy apps to a newer architecture. How do you handle deployments to different types of environments? And how do you have a standard process that everybody across different teams and within your company can use, so you'll be able to leverage your processes and have a single solution across your whole company? But if you're a developer or in operations, you'll have another set of questions. You may want to use cloud, hybrid, as well as on-premise, and how do you handle all those different environments? You may be using ad hoc scripting, but you've sort of reached a wall in terms of how far you can scale with it. You want to know what other types of processes there are that will help scale your process with your organization. And you may have bottlenecks. You want to know, where are the parts of your release process that are actually, holding you back, and how do you improve these and improve your efficiency? And unfortunately, the XebiaLabs DevOps platform addresses all these needs. So, looking at this picture right here, this is the XebiaLabs DevOps platform, which is a comprehensive release orchestration and deployment automation solution. The picture there on the left that you see is actually all the different components of the platform, which includes the release orchestration, which actually handles, staging all the different components of your release process, all the way from planning and coding up through deployment to production. Deployment automation actually uses a model-based deployment, which allows you to map applications to environments without actually having to do any ad hoc scripting. DevOps intelligence is what actually gathers the data across the entire pipeline and pulls together different insights so you can view them in dashboards and reports, and identify things such as chain of custody, where you can see where changes were introduced into your pipeline, and security reports. You might want to see what's your failure rate, both real time as well as over time. And it's really the DevOps intelligence that pulls together these insights and lets you see them all together on one screen, which is a really powerful way of being able to quickly identify and resolve problems. Also, the DevOps intelligence does provide the capability too of AI and ML, which allows predictive intelligence. So then you actually have the capability where you can identify a release that's likely to fail even before you actually start your release. So you can begin your debug process without having to wait for the failure to actually occur. Now, the thing to mention too is, that you're not tied to one given architecture. You may be starting off on premise, but you may later, but you may want to actually move later on to being on the cloud. Or you may decide, that you may want to move to a multi-cloud solution. The thing is that, our solution, the DevOps platform, allows, your architecture to change as your business needs change. And so you're not tied to one solution. You have the flexibility of many different types of approaches, be it cloud or on-premise, be it containers or, microservices. All this flexibility, is at your fingertips in terms of how you can deploy your application. And finally, you may have your existing DevOps pipeline, either tools in there that you like using, and you want to keep them. Well, the benefit is that you don't have to give up the tools that you like. You can incorporate them into your single DevOps pipeline, as part of the XebiaLabs DevOps platform there. So we support numerous integrations. In addition to Delphix and Datical, you can use Jira, you can use Jenkins, ServiceNow, a whole bunch of them, hundreds of integrations actually. So you can actually build your single release pipeline with all the tools that you want and to use and not have to give up anything as you integrate into the XebiaLabs DevOps platform. And so we provide the end-to-end solution for continuous delivery at enterprise scale. And back to you, Richard.
Thanks a lot, Scott. I would tell you from where we've implemented this tool, the ability to allow customers to see their entire value chain from beginning to end, it's truly a game changer. I don't think there's anything out there like it, so very good capability. We'd love to share with other folks.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely.
So what we're going to do is, before we move on, if I get my screen to actually move on here, before we get into the Delphix discussion, if there are any questions, we're going to probably finish a little ahead of time. So if there are any questions, I would ask that you guys use the question capability to send your questions to me, and at the end I'll try to address or get those out to the audience as much as possible, rather than asking you at the end. I'd like to go ahead and start getting some of those flowing in. So the next one we're going to move to is the Delphix side of things, and I will just tell you that, as I've mentioned several times, you're only as fast as the slowest piece, and test data management has been a huge challenge at every client we've been at. The more we're trying to build environments and reset data and create production-like mass data, et cetera, it's just a huge thing that most customers either have nothing or they've tried to build something on their own, and they're having very low levels of success with it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Adam to allow him to talk about how you can really get faster CI/CD pipelines integrating with a Delphix solution. So Adam, take it away.
Thanks, Richard. If you can take me to that first slide, I would appreciate it. So first, look, I'm going to pull a little reading rainbow for everybody, and you don't take my word for it. But if I go to the authority on it, so here I have my DevOps handbook, and it's actually like an old church lady's Bible. I really have things all marked up to it. But the beginning of chapter 9 actually says, in order to create a fast and reliable flow of dev to ops, we must ensure that we always use production-like environments at every stage of the value stream. Furthermore, these environments must be created in an automated manner, ideally on demand from scripts and configuration information stored in version control, and entirely self-service without any manual work required from operations. Our goal is to ensure that we can recreate the entire production environment based on what's in version control. And so then if I take my other book, which is Dr. Forsgren's Accelerate. Thank you, Robert. I can see, even though you're on mute, I can see the applause, so I appreciate that. But if I take Dr. Forsgren's book, Accelerate, I don't even have to get into the first chapter, which, by the way, is autographed. Thanks, Dr. Forsgren. But if I look in the very beginning, the quick reference, she lists 24 key capabilities to actually accelerate your application lifecycle. And the first 6 are version control, deployment automation, continuous integration, trunk-based development, test automation, test data management. That's the first 6 of 24. And I would go to wager, I'll make a bold statement. If you don't have Delphix, then you're probably not doing any of those for data. And so that becomes the barrier, because I can't do that for data. Data's the elephant in the room. Well, if you don't have Delphix, you can't. But I have plenty of customers that are using Delphix and say they can't, right? And they do. And so if you see it looking at this slide here, Delphix is a data ops platform for enterprise data. It delivers self-service access to personal, production, quality, secure data environments. It's deployable anywhere. So on-premise, in the cloud, wherever your data's at, that's where Delphix can operate. It connects to any data source. So we support the big typical monoliths, Oracle, which I know you hate to pay those bills, but Oracle, Microsoft SQL, Sybase, DB2, all those. And then many more. Mongo, Informix, if you're crazy and still run on Informix. We have customers using Delphix for that, or even just application tiers. We have customers using Delphix to deliver the data for their whole 3-tiered environment of an Oracle e-business suite. So Delphix just cares about getting your data to you, and no matter what the data source is. And there's 4 key areas of our data ops platform. The first is virtualization, and that's the really neat bit that if you don't have Delphix, you're not living life. And that's we provide a unique virtualization technology that results in delivering data sets of any size in minutes and with a near zero storage footprint. So that, like Robert said earlier, next to no storage. So imagine being able to spin up a 3 terabyte database and having it ready to use in 3.5 minutes if I'm being generous. Sometimes things being slow, and consuming maybe 20 megs of storage. Right. That's how Delphix customers operate. We also, so the second tier of our platform is masking. So we provide the ability to create policies to mask data in a standard way across multiple sources, providing realistic data with referential integrity across the whole enterprise. So Adam Bowen is masked to John Smith across all of your applications, regardless of what technology they are and what format they come in. And that provides you with data free of personally identifiable information or customer information without losing the business value of the data. So you can still run reports on meaningful data. You can still run your AI/ML against meaningful data. It's realistic. It's just not real, which is super important. Third tier is operations. So we give you powerful self-service and API-driven operations that developers, testers, and analysts can perform on data without having to involve a DBA, sysadmins, or things like that. So that those self-service features are features like bookmarking, sharing, refreshing, rewinding, pausing, stopping, and branching data too. And of course, the last tier is who doesn't love reports, right? So we give you the ability to manage and report to maintain the right level of governance and auditability on the data that is being accessed. Next slide, please, Richard.
You almost caught me off guard there.
See, you're so entranced.
I was entranced by your.
Tell me more.
Man.
I'm glad you asked, right? So many of the world's leading organizations, including AT&T, Clorox, Fannie Mae, HPE, Toyota, and actually more than 30 of the Fortune 100 are actually rely on Delphix to fast track software development and speed new applications to market. You can see across here many names on there, and we, as a Delphix perspective, not only do we attract the biggest companies with the most complex data sets, but also we keep them. We have an upper 90s retention rate on all of our customers, and we recently had a 100% customer satisfaction rate in the last quarter with our support. So we not only care about data, but we care about our customers getting the right data to the right people at the right time. And it shows, honestly. Next slide, please, Richard. And so who benefits from Delphix? Kind of like what Scott said. Look, Delphix benefits multiple teams across the enterprise. We have application development teams can accelerate their release timelines. The security and compliance teams can ensure that non-production data is just as secure as production data. IT operations teams can make data available to any stakeholder in minutes. The line of business leaders can launch new digital services to market at a faster pace. And even data scientists can train their models on the most up-to-date data. And I think, is that my last slide, Richard?
I think it is. It is.
I forget. So sorry to bring it to such an abrupt end, but
I'm bringing my credit card out. I was just going to go ahead and let you swipe it. Let me
perfect, exactly. Yeah.
Holy cow! Awesome job, Adam. Thank you. And man, we're moving forward. They've set the bar high for Robert now. I got to see if he's going to be able to jump over. So
now it's the big one.
Yeah, it is the big one. So this is truly the black hole. As I mentioned before, I was a DBA, and to see some of the things that are happening and taking some of those same concepts that we've applied to other areas of a DevOps tool chain to as code approach to the database capability and release management is something that's just really on the leading edge. And so I'm going to turn it over to Robert and let him talk about the Datical offer.
Well, thanks, Richard. Hey, Richard, you said you were DBA. What does that stand for?
I think it's don't bother asking.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. There is a huge disconnect between the data tier and the application tier. And it is really unfair to our database administrators. We have been asking them to do more with the resources that they have today. It's just unfair. It really is. Asking them to refresh environments, asking them to make schema changes, while the application side of the house is automating and doing really cool, neat things. That is not only unfair to our database professionals, but it's also unfair to the organization. We can't reach the kind of goals that we want for our line of business unless we're moving everybody forward. And so one of the things that is a challenge for large enterprises is making changes to that database schema. When you update your application, you need to make changes to the database schema. You need to add a column, update a stored procedure, who knows what. And what we found is that companies start to automate with the application, but quickly realize that they have neglected the data tier. But that's okay, we can help. And this is a list of customers that we have certainly helped out with. You'll certainly see some overlap between the three vendors that are here. And it's really important to understand that, you know, oftentimes people start to implement DevOps and it's dev and a little bit of ops. And we really need to tackle the entire application as a whole if we're going to truly accelerate the enterprise. Richard, let's go to that next slide. Because I like this slide because it really, you know, everybody has something at stake here. And whether you're an executive, you know, enterprise architect, app dev, DevOps professional, QA, DBA, there is something here that needs to be fixed. And, you know, just like Scott was saying, you know, every single person, and Adam, every single person here's role has a stake and it affects them differently. And I think this goes back to what Richard was saying previously about culture. It's very important for us to break down these silos. One, because it's inefficient. But two, it creates a culture of conflict. And this idea that there is tribalism inside the organization, it doesn't do anybody any good. I'm a DBA, and so this is the area that I focus on. Well, no, you're actually a member of the company. You're an employee. You're a trusted and valued member of that team, and you need to look out for your brothers and sisters. And by tackling this problem in the data tier, that's what it really accelerates organizations moving forward. And when we start talking about enterprise DevOps, it's important to focus on every aspect that is required for that application. And when you're implementing DevOps, it is important to include all the normal DevOps antibodies. And that includes the database tier, that includes security, that includes even procurement, and getting all these folks in a room and helping them understand the value, not only to the business, but also to the individual, because that's how we make real change. We appeal to the person and frankly help people understand that if they adopt DevOps at every part of the application stack, that means they get to go to more piano recitals, little league games, date nights, all those things. We have more engaged employees, and engaged employees that feel trusted and valued, well, they write better software and they get it out the door faster. So Richard, let me go ahead and turn it back over to you and you can do your overview of Orasi.
You caught me totally off guard there, man. I was
high speed, low drag. We're DevOps professionals here.
Holy cow, my gosh. Well, I appreciate it. I was looking at some of the questions that are being asked and making sure I understood how to get to them. I'll take just a couple of moments and talk to you about our piece in delivering enterprise DevOps. So Orasi, if many of you are probably familiar with Orasi from their sort of version 1.0, probably the first decade or so, becoming one of the best known QA quality focused companies in the world. Over the last few years, we've been really rebuilding ourselves, and today DevOps is at the core of everything we do. From an integration standpoint, we have an offering, a tool offering called ConnectAll that allows you to tie together different pieces of the pipeline. From an app security standpoint, we have a group called SaltWorks that allows us to get in and really analyze and help rebuild and improve a lot of your security capabilities as well as the tools that support it. And then in the DevOps space, as I mentioned, we support both the CI, the CT, and the CD space, but because of our testing background, we are really specialists in the continuous testing. We're doing a ton of work in infrastructure as code and in continuous integration, but in the things that can happen in the continuous testing space, I think we're sort of leading edge there. And so that's kind of what we do. As far as how we go to market, just sort of a roadmap, we have what's called our strategy services, which is basically saying, where are you today? How do I recalculate where you want to go, and how do I come up with a plan for moving you there? So we'll do that across the entire pipeline, or for a segment like infrastructure as code or test data management. Once we get into beyond the strategy, we also offer a whole set of services around delivering. So everything from sort of test driving it via POC, getting into what we call a cruise mode, which is we'll just provide mentoring on a bunch of the technologies and let your team do the work. And then accelerate is where we bring a cross-functional team of CI, CT, and CD people team together to actually accelerate how fast. As for example, we automated one client's entire pipeline in 12 weeks, rebuilt their infrastructure, implemented all of their test cases, et cetera. And then over here on the far right, what most people are probably unfamiliar with is this whole rural service. And so depending on your maturity, we could blend this in with our regular delivery team, but we offer rural staff aug. And so what that means is rather than having consultants on site being very experienced in mentoring your folks, we can team those with people in our North Carolina-based rural facility at a totally different price point, et cetera, to help deliver and expand your DevOps team. We have something called Tool Shield, where it allows us to actually go in and say, hey, you focus on building out the pipeline, but what we're going to do is we're going to take over the administration on the back end at our rural facility of things like Jenkins, Jira, those type things. And then we have a managed DevOps solution. So again, our whole focus is trying to make sure that our clients, their pipelines are predictable, fast, and continuous. And that's sort of our play in the whole thing, is bringing all of these pieces together, basing them on the experiences that we've had in delivering some of the leading edge solutions. So I am going to go out, I'm going to take a look. We are in record time. We have 4 vendors working together. We're ahead of schedule, so it's truly remarkable. I do appreciate it, Adam, Scott, and Robert. I'm going to look out here and see if I can do this. Some of the questions that are being asked, and I'll just pass it along. So one of the questions. If
this is efficient, you should see the 3 of us working together on site.
If you take me out of the loop, you could really move fast. So
no. You're the straw that stirs the drink.
I know. Yes, I know. So one of the questions we had was, does the Datical solution change in any way how Scrum teams do their jobs today? Do they need to do things differently when they take a solution like Datical into account? I guess that would be for you, Robert.
I think so. I'll try to make a stab at this one. I'll do my best. I would argue that Scrum teams today are doing strange and unnatural. They're having to change how they do it, dealing with the database team. Here's an example. You have a release that goes out. You have tested it against Delphix VDBs. XebiaLabs is automating the deployment of that, yet you have not automated your schema change. That SQL script goes through a manual process tracked with XebiaLabs, but it's still manual. You're relying on people. You're in a wait state, and there's a problem with it. 11th hour, it's going to production, and a DBA finally reviews it because they're very busy, because dev is very efficient, pushing changes, and then they have to send it back. Well, that means the team, that agile team, that Scrum, might have been moving on to the next sprint. And so they have to go back to the previous sprint to make changes and to fix that. What Datical can do is catch those violations of policy. So for example, let's say naming convention policy. You didn't preface a table with T underscore, or you're requesting a foreign key be added without the columns in that foreign key previously having an index. Datical will actually stop that, flag that as a violation, and will actually break the build. And there's 2 ways to get a development team, a Scrum team, to move very quickly. One is an email that says there's food in the break room. The second is you've broken the build. And that's what DevOps teaches us, fast feedback loops. And so to answer the question, I say it makes Scrum teams, their way they interact, more natural. treats database code changes just like application code changes.
Gotcha. Okay. Great job there, Robert. Let me see if I can, one of the other question was, says, I think this is for Delphix. We offshore some of our development and testing. How would a Delphix type solution fit into a scenario where we need to share data externally?
Yes, so thanks, Richard. So obviously that one's over to me. So look, honestly, you saw on that customer slide, all the customers we had there. Actually, the very question that you posed was the reason a lot of them got involved with Delphix. Because with Delphix, since we can take your production-like data and mask it and deliver it in minutes, it doesn't matter where your production instance is and where it resides. So if we say for one of my largest customers is a bank based out of England, and they had, in 2015, they had more developers than Google, over 20,000 developers. But most of their development is done in India, but most of the data resides outside of the United Kingdom, and some stuff also in Europe. So they were able to, with Delphix, connect to that data. They're able to sanitize that data, mask it, obfuscate it, whatever you want to call it. And then they're able to take that clean data and they're able to distribute it to their teams wherever they reside. Now, in this case, these were several development centers and testing centers throughout India. This can also be to the cloud, like Azure or Amazon. And think what your biggest barrier to cloud projects is. Well, it's security. Why? Because you're worried that somebody's going to do something stupid and somebody's going to hack your data in the cloud. Well, if you use Delphix to actually sanitize all your data before it ever leaves those secure, highly secure production zones, then in the event you do get hacked, and it will happen regardless of how well you do it, you'll get hacked whether it's on cloud premise or an offshore, then the only thing that's happened is someone has stolen an empty purse, right? So it looks valuable, it looks like real goods, and it looks like real information, but it's all fake. So what do you have to do at that point? Patch the hole, file a security incident, but you don't have to notify customers and you don't have to answer to Congress or to some other regulation or body about why you sacrifice all your customers' information. So actually, my kind of position would be, how do you securely develop high quality applications quickly with offshore development if you're not using Delphix, would be my thought of it.
Okay, great answer, Adam. I'm sitting here reading through just a couple more. I think this one might be for Xebia. What are some of the biggest benefits and opportunities for end-to-end visibility across the entire pipeline?
Yeah.
Susan, that's at you.
Yeah, that does sound like a question for me. I mean, I think the biggest benefits here that we're talking about is sort of, as I said earlier, is that you have all of your data in one place. You know, if you don't have visibility on a portion of your end-to-end pipeline, then that data can't be brought together and analyzed with sort of the big picture data there. And you'll have holes in your data, and you won't be able to draw the same level of conclusions or draw the same insights or even identify all the problems. And if you did need to find the data from those missing chunks, you'd have to go digging through different tools and different logs, and it would be a generally more time-consuming and difficult process there. I mean, once you bring everything into one place, you have your single screen, your single place where you can start to dive in and resolve issues and more quickly identify problems. You can feed all of your data into something like AI and ML, and obviously the more data that gets fed into it and the more complete your data is, it will be able to build better models and draw better conclusions. So as a result, you know, you'll be able to improve your business efficiency. You'll be able to have better business results by being able to see all of your data end to end.
Awesome. So we are still way ahead of schedule. So what I'm going to do is there was a couple other questions, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give each one of you like 60 seconds, 90 seconds, just to any follow-up, and I'll start with you again, Scott. Is there just sort of last notes? And at the end, what I'd like to do is talk about sort of our offer to the folks who are joined us today and what we're willing to do as far as helping you guys, you know, the folks in the audience mature their DevOps capabilities, talk to them. But Scott, is there any sort of final note you would want to put out there to the folks listening?
Sure. You know, I mean, just as I mentioned before, you know, the XebiaLabs DevOps platform, it pulls together your entire environment. You can use all of your existing tools, pull it together in one release pipeline. You know, obviously with the power of Delphix and Datical, you have your complete automation database solution as well. So really, the XebiaLabs provides you with the comprehensive deployment automation and release orchestration platform that gives you the flexibility to release and deploy to your environment of your choice. And this platform really pulls it all together.
Great, thank you. What about you? Who would be Adam with Delphix? Any sort of parting words?
Sure. Look, data's hard. We all know that. That's probably why you're attending this webinar. But ultimately, with the combination of, of all of us on this call that are presenting, our customers have made it amazingly easier. Data's still complex, but the theory of constraints is I'll try and tackle the nearest constraint to you, and usually that constraint is data. But a theory of constraint says that if you don't actually tackle the most immediate constraint, then you're creating an illusion of actually making things faster, right? So you might do speed at sacrifice of quality. With our customers together, and much of the illustration that Robert's talked about earlier, they're finding a way to bring data into the pipeline, being able to reap all the benefits that you've poured into evolving your culture, process, and people in DevOps, to bringing that to your enterprise data as well. And when you can bring all these things together, then you're not leaving anybody behind. Everybody gets on the bus, right? And so everybody can move forward together, and all your applications can be delivered in a higher quality.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Robert, what about you? Any last words?
We didn't come up with that formula for enterprise DevOps. That was our customers. Certainly, we all solve a piece of this. And where we started to get very excited and decide to partner is because we saw customers do this. So great, for the people on the webinar, yay, it's been done before. That's the good news. The bad news is it's been done before, probably by one of your competitors. So, look, the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago, second best time today. What I would argue is that this is the time to do it. Richard, can you put up that 2-hour whiteboarding thing? Yep. This right here, for everybody that's on this is an opportunity to bring somebody in who doesn't have ties to individual silos inside your organization, to have an outside, unbiased voice, not a vendor. Not a vendor, somebody that comes in and has seen far more companies do this successfully, come in and give you advice. So, don't believe us, believe Orasi, have a chat with them and see what are some areas that can be improved. This is what DevOps is about, to identify those big rocks and to remove them and lather, rinse, repeat, then work on the next biggest rock, and then next and next and next. And pretty soon, you got it solved. This is how DevOps works, but it has to work now. You have to do this now, because people that haven't adopted it, they're running out of time because their competitors already have.
Great. There's nothing else for me to say. I put our email, my email, Terry Brennan, my partner in this practice, up there. Please give us a yell. We're happy we're in the South, so I can say yell. Give us a call, and we would love to come out and spend some time with you guys, invest, try to help you guys move these things forward, and we will look to respond as quickly as possible. So I appreciate everybody joining. Scott, Adam, Robert, thank you very much. All the time everybody's put into it, and just look forward to meeting all of the folks that are listening in the near future on site at your place. Thank you very much.